Stanford University.
The Human Experience. Inside the Humanities at Stanford University. humanexperience.stanford.edu.
Stanford is an institution known for firsts, but this really is a groundbreaking first. This meeting, bringing together technology experts and humanists, could only happen in a place like Silicon Valley and Stanford. But equally importantly, it could only happen with the help of a lot of people, but one very determined person who really had a vision for creating this, who put her heart and soul into it, and that's Anais. We all owe her a big round of applause for all of her work. We believe that there are many ways that humanists can contribute to growth and innovation for which Silicon Valley and this university is known. In short, we think a partnership could be increasingly beneficial to both sides of the equation. The founding grant of this university defines the mission as the instruction of students with a view to producing leaders in every field. And over the past century, our alumni have been people of great accomplishment. When you hear things like Cisco Systems, Charles Schwab, The Gap, Mrs. Fields Cookies, Ning, Overstock.com, Google, Yahoo, the Supreme Court, ambassadors, astronauts, governors, mayors, members of Congress, and of course countless artists, musicians, and even a movie star who wore a Stanford t-shirt. In Avatar, you should think of Stanford because people from Stanford were involved in leading or co-founding every one of those institutions. And they're just some of the many examples that Stanford graduates have gone on, using their grounding in the humanities as a central part of their leadership role. But I don't think this is an accident. Stanford is a university that was founded with the belief that a liberal arts education is crucial. In fact, I remember a few years ago I was talking to a father who was counseling his son on whether to go to MIT or Stanford. And he said to me, he was a Stanford alum, I should point out, so he had some bias in this. But he said to me, I wanted my son to know who Thoreau was and what he thought about. And that's why I told him he should go to Stanford. And I think it is that grounding in the humanities that is a core part of producing people who not just are great sprinters, but who are great marathon runners over a life of contributions. This actually dates back to Stanford's view. When Leland Stanford was writing about his hopes for the university, he said, I attach great importance to general literature for the enlargement of the mind and for giving business capacity. I think I have noticed that technically educated women and men do not make the most successful business people. The imagination needs to be cultivated and developed to assure success in life. I was reminded of this recently when one of our young alumni, Christopher Tin, won 2 Grammys this past year. He was an undergraduate here in English literature and music and won the first Grammy ever for musical composition accompanying a video game, Civilization 4. But the music, those of you that know the Stanford a cappella scene, the music was an instrumental version of Baba Yetu, a song that is constantly recorded and it was one of Talisman's hallmarks. So it really was a wonderful story of him bringing his insight, culture, and his deep experience. We believe that creativity is a powerful weapon in the intellectual arsenal as our students go forward and work. I think today you'll have an opportunity to see that in many different ways and understand how we can use the distinctive strengths of people who really understand something very different than those of us that live over in the computer science side of the world. So I hope you find these discussions stimulating. Now it is my privilege and great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Vivek Ranadive, CEO and founder of TIBCO. He is truly a visionary when it comes to the issue of business integration, the man who led the advancement in the use of real-time business decision-making. When he founded TIBCO in 1997, he initially focused the company on bringing real-time processing into the mainstream and he focused on financial services. Today, that technology is used by more than 400 of the world's largest companies, and everything from finances to energy to manufacturing, factory automation, telecommunications, and electronic commerce. He has authored 2 books that are widely read in business and academia: The Power of Now, How Winning Companies Sense and Respond to Change Using Real-Time Technology, and his subsequent book, The Power to Predict, which explored ways to create opportunities for businesses to look out over the horizon and to watch for the unexpected. Publications ranging from The Economist to Fast Company. Now, there's a Fast Company. Imagine a thing about businesses called Fast Company. That's what it's called. And Red Herring, as well as CNN, have cited his expertise and innovations, and he has won numerous awards from many business groups around the country. A few years ago, he was featured in a New Yorker article where he talked about the importance of real-time decision-making and pointed out some of the absurdities in government, where the Federal Reserve takes 2 weeks before it adjusts interest rates in a world where that interest rate simply changes at the speed of light by just changing a number in a computer. Why do we take 2 weeks to do it, he asked. It's no wonder that Malcolm Gladwell, author of The Tipping Point and Outliers, cited him as an example of innovators whose success comes from doing the unexpected, breaking the rules. He is a native of Mumbai, India. He saw a documentary on Massachusetts Institute of Technology and decided to study there. After earning his undergraduate degree and master's in electrical engineering from MIT, he obtained his MBA from Harvard, where he was a Baker Scholar. In a profile for the Harvard Business School Bulletin, he talked about the way he thought about business opportunities in the U.S. And he said, and I quote, "You can have big dreams here. The United States is a very multicultural and open country. When dealing with technology and open systems that can be leveraged by anyone, they will thrive over closed proprietary systems. And I think of the United States as an open system in that sense." Later in that same profile, he explained his views on leadership. He said, "My role is to let people do their own thing and make sure that it comes out sounding like music. It's more like leading a jazz group than a marching band. That's the job of a leader." I think it's a great analogy. Now, I also know he is a great fan of basketball. This began with him acting as coach for his daughter's middle school team. He is now the co-owner and vice chairman of the Golden State Warriors NBA team, and dreams on taking the sport of basketball to India. Now, I could talk more about passion for basketball and why it's good preparation for business, but I think that is the topic of our speaker's talk. So please join me in welcoming Vivek Ranadive to Stanford.
Well, thanks for the generous introduction, and thank you for hosting this conference. And Anais, thank you for creating the conference. Look at what you've done. This is right brain thinking at its best. So I applaud you on the success of this event. I've made it a lifelong habit to do things that I know nothing about. I'm a hardware engineer, and I started and run one of the world's largest software companies. I studied, as Professor Hennessy said, I started at IIT. I couldn't cut it there, so I went to some school on the East Coast, MIT, and did a couple of degrees there in engineering, and then went on and got a Harvard MBA. So if there's anybody who's a poster child for a left brain education, it's me. And I am supremely, supremely unqualified to give this lecture. So I hope you guys will give me a pass. What I hope to do today is mount a defense of the humanities, a vigorous defense, a vigorous defense. Not a defense as in if you study the arts, you'll be a more well-rounded person, or if you study French, you'll be able to go to France and connect with the French people, order in a French restaurant, or if you study music, it'll make you better at math. No. What I hope to convince all of you today is that if you show up on the steps of this great university, you are better off in the humanities building than you are in the computer science building. What I hope to convince all of you, and I hope to convince Professor Hennessy, that this is about the competitiveness of nations. This is about the competitiveness of the United States. And we have to keep funding the humanities. Let me start by asking you guys a few simple questions. I think there's writing materials in front of you. And I'm going to just ask you to humor me. I'm going to ask you a few simple questions and just write the answers down. First question is, what is 7 times 8? Just write the answer. 7 times 8. Okay, I think everyone's got that. Okay, the next question is, what I would like all of you to do is spend a moment, just take a moment, and write a 2-line rhyme. Just a 2-line rhyme. Just anything that comes to mind. Just write a rhyme. Just humor me. You got it, Murat? Okay. Well, it gets a little harder now. Professor Hennessy has kindly agreed that he's going to fund all of you in your own web startup. So you've just been made CEO of your own web startup, and he's providing the funding. And what you guys are going to be doing is building iPhone apps. So what I'd like you to do is just describe in a couple of lines what that killer app for iPhones is going to be. Now, I know that might take longer than a moment, so if you feel, if the idea comes to you as I'm talking, feel free to write it down. That's nice of you, Professor Hennessy, that you're going to fund all these people. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to show you, I just want to show one chart. There's 2, but I just want to show the one chart. Is that possible? Okay. So this is a chart. This is a classic left brain chart, okay? And you got like one line going up and one line coming down, and then there's a crossover point and there's a date. So anybody who can tell me what this is, I'm going to give them a small present. Just look at the chart, and then just if anybody can guess what it is, I'll give you a small present. No, I'll take the answers at the end, okay? So I'll take the answers at the end. Okay, let's move on. You can take the chart off. Okay, what I'd like to do is I'd like to get to the topic. And I think the title was How I Managed to Pay My Bills and How I Won a Basketball Game and How I Landed This Gig. So let me get on with that. I have a software company. We've got about 4,000 clients. It's got about $1 billion in revenue. And it's one of the fastest growing software companies. But I'm a hardware engineer, and I know very little about software. So in order to tell you what my big idea, I have to share with you how these left-brain people have been building software for the last 50 years. So say you want to build software to run the factory, and let's call that piece of software A. So the way that you do it is very interesting. You take this piece of software, put it under the microscope, and you analyze it. What you'll find is that 70 to 80% of the actual code is infrastructure. Bring this piece of information from here, do this, do that, bring it all together. And then only 20% of it is the actual application itself. So that's your application A. Well, you got the factory software, so now you got to build some planning software. Let's call that B. So then what these guys do is put that under the microscope, analyze it. Same thing. 70 to 80% of the code is infrastructure. 20% of it is the application. And then you have to build a bridge to make A and B talk. And it has to be a two-way bridge. More left brain thinking. Okay, now you've got the factory, you've got the planning. Well, how about marketing? Let's get marketing in there. So you build an application C and put that under the microscope, analyze that. And what you find is 80% of that code is infrastructure. And then you build the application. And then you have to build 2 bridges. You've got to have C talk to A and C talk to B, and they have to talk both ways. Well, let's get sales involved. So now you build an application D, and more left brain thinking, more infrastructure. And now D has to have 3 back and forth or 6 interfaces between A, B, and C so that you can all communicate. So when you look at what companies are having to do, when you look at their IT budgets, 80% of their budget goes into maintaining those back and forth interfaces as opposed to building applications that add value. Just imagine if we asked these left-brain people to help us all communicate. There's 300 million people in the United States. What they would have you do is learn 300 million languages. So every time a new person was born, that person would create their own language, and they would have to learn 300 million more languages so they could communicate with everyone else. Now, I was a hardware engineer, knew nothing about software. If you look at a computer, take the top of your computer, there's a backplane or a bus, and you plug cards into it. And so you can communicate through a single interface. And so I came up with this idea of a software bus. Why not have a bus and then through a single, they call that an API, an application programmer interface. And it's kind of like saying, let's all just speak English, and you don't need to learn 300 million languages. So that was the big idea. It's called the bus, and that was the big idea that I had that's helped me pay my bills. And again, to me, it's an example of out-of-the-box right-brain thinking. Well, let me move on and give you another example in my life. I'm a single dad, and a few years ago, in order to be close to my daughter, I foolishly volunteered to coach her basketball team. And the reason I say foolishly is because I grew up in Bombay, and I've never, ever played basketball. Like, I haven't even, touched a basketball. So I want to be close to my daughter. I say I'll coach her NJB team, and I show up at this massive building in Redwood City, which is the gym, and I walk in, and I realize that I'm already behind the curve. So they have this thing called a draft, and they go and they pick all the best players. So of course they've given the Indian nerd all the girls that nobody else wants. So I'm already behind. Then I look around, and there's all these courts over there, and there's these guys, these like giants, these 7-foot guys. They've all played Division I basketball, many of them for Professor Hennessy. And they've got all these sheets and these plays and these formulas. And here I am, and there's nothing more terrifying than standing in front of 8 12-year-old girls, one of whom is your daughter, and you're about to make a fool of yourself. That is like the most terrifying feeling in the world. So that particular day, I decided that since I didn't know anything, I was just going to bluff my way through it. And I said that I believed in fitness, and so I was just going to have the girls run. So these girls just ran for that whole session. So then I went back and I started looking at the game. And I grew up playing soccer. And one of the things that puzzled me, and I couldn't for the life of me understand, was the way that basketball was played. The way that we play soccer is that you continuously contest the ball. In basketball, what happens is when one team has the ball, the other team retreats to its half and waits for the first team to advance the ball. Why the heck do they do that? So I decided that I was going to continuously, in an unrelenting fashion, contest the ball. All 40 minutes of the game, 40 minutes of pain. Now, they call that the full court press in basketball. The other thing that puzzled me was when people inbound the ball, there's a person guarding the inbounder. This person is jumping up and down like a monkey. You see this in the NBA, you see this in college, in high school, and I cannot understand what this person does. So what I decided is that I would have this person guarding or double teaming the best player on the opposing team, and I would have a 5-on-4 advantage. And instead of having my players guard the other players from behind, I would have them front the player, so the other team would not even get the ball. So those were some of the out-of-the-box right brain type strategies that I applied. And here's what happened. I won every single game. and I took my team to nationals. There were games when I would be up 25-0, and the other team had yet to touch the ball. And the ref then came to me, opened up the rule book, and said, you can't do that anymore, coach. It's against the rules. There was one game where one of the other coaches was so upset that he said he wanted to meet me in the parking lot outside. Fortunately for me, on that particular day, my friend Roger Craig, the legendary football player, was right there, and I hid behind Roger. So thanks, Roger. Well, let me share with you what I believe are the 5 forces that are going to shape the future. And you need to understand what these forces are. The first factor is whatever can be done in India and China will be done in India and China. A few hundred years ago, India and China were 2/3 of the world economy, and at some point in the future, they will regain that status. So this is the first factor. Whatever can be done in India and China will be done in India and China. The second factor is these left-brain guys have actually done a pretty decent job with building computers. And so whatever can be done by a computer will be done by a computer. In fact, Time magazine says in 30 years, all left-brain functions will be replicated by computers. The third factor is one that you guys all understand. Social networks are not just a fad. Social networks are a powerful force, and they're going to change everything. They're going to change how we shop. They're going to change how we work. They're going to change how we relate to people. They're going to change everything. Now, here's the fourth factor. I call it platforms. You no longer need the heft and the machinery of a big corporation to reach large audiences. You will have the emergence of these very powerful platforms through which an individual will be able to reach millions, hundreds of millions, even billions of people. Platforms like Facebook, like YouTube, like the iPhone App Store. Now, when you take these 4 factors, whatever can be done in India and China will be done in India and China. Whatever can be done by a computer will be done by a computer. The emergence of social networks and the emergence of these very powerful platforms, then it leads to my 5th factor, which is the redefinition of the corporation. The corporation of the future will be very different from the corporation of the past. Corporations, after all, are a relatively modern invention. In the 10,000 years of human civilization, corporations have only existed for the last couple of 100 years. Before that, people were individual contributors. They were artisans, they were carpenters, they were painters. So with the emergence of these 4 factors, with the emergence of platforms, it'll be back to the future. The emphasis in the past was really, it was a hierarchical way of doing things. We tried to get individualistic, but it was largely hierarchical. In the corporation of the future, it'll be more about collaboration. So when you consider those 5 factors, when you consider that everything that can be done in India and China will, everything that can be done by a computer will, social networks are a powerful factor, platforms, and the redesign of the corporation, and you say, okay, I show up at this great university, and I have all these places I can go. I can go to the computer science building, I can go to the business school, brand new building, or I can study the humanities. What should I do? What should I do? Well, let me tell you, I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret. Every left-brained person would rather be a right-brained person. Every programmer would rather be a poet. Every mechanical engineer would rather be a musician. Every aeronautics guy would rather be an artist. So what do? Do you study about the human condition, how people relate to each other? Do you ask big questions? Or do you learn how to program a computer? Do you learn critical thinking or do you learn empirical thinking? Do you learn how to connect the dots or do you drill into the dots? Do you think outside the box or do you optimize inside the box? What do you do? Well, let me see. Maybe I should go to the computer science building and learn C++. But wait a minute. Factor number 1 says that everything that can be done in India and China will be done in India and China. And for a fraction of the cost, by the way. So maybe not. Well, let's wander over to the business school. Maybe I should get a MBA. Maybe I should get a master's in business administration. But wait a minute. Computers can crunch spreadsheets. And there's 1 billion Indians and 1 billion Chinese that are perfectly willing to do that. So maybe, just maybe, I'm better off getting a master's in fine arts. After all, we engineers, we just create the platform. We're just the stagehands. We just create the stage. But it's the writers and the directors and the artists and the actors. You guys are the main deal. You guys are the performers. All we're doing is building that stage. Okay, let me now get back and talk about the questions that I asked. Okay, so 7 times 8, so who got 56? Okay, so everyone got 56? Everyone got 56. Well, the good news is we all got the same answer, and by the way, there's 1 billion Indians, 1 billion Chinese, and a lot of computers that can do that. Is there anybody in this room who would be kind enough to read me their rhyme? Sir?
I had left brain, right brain, both are German.
I like that. Left brain, right brain, both are German. That's awesome. That's great. Okay, let me ask you a question. Is there anybody in this room who has the same rhyme?
That would be amazing.
Yeah. Well, I rest my case for the right brain. This is creation at its best. This is the right brain at its best. It's unique, it's creation, and he is the only person on this entire planet that could have come up with that. Now, iPhone apps. I'm going to actually skip the answer to that question because Professor Hennessy, I have a friend here, Dave Cheriton, and a few years ago he told me that I should invest in a couple of guys that were students of his, and he's a very smart guy, so I listened to him, and it's a company called Google. So what I'm going to do is anybody who wants to email me their idea, just send it to me. I'm Vivek@tibco.com, and I want it for myself. So. Okay, let's see. Did anyone figure out what that chart was? Anyone in this room? Sir? Okay, so here is what the chart is, okay? The upward line, that is the market cap of Apple. The blue line is the market cap of Microsoft. Folks, May 2010, that is the day in history that the right brain beat the left brain. It is the day in history when Steve Jobs finally beat Bill Gates. Sometimes life doesn't always happen on schedule. I like to say that the 21st century didn't actually start in the year 2000. Just as the 20th century, in my mind, started in 1908 with the advent of the automobile. It became the century of the automobile, the century of highways and freeways, the American century. So similarly, I believe that the 21st century started sometime in the last year or two. You have more cell phones than landlines. You have more laptops than desktops. You have more debit cards than credit cards. You have more girls in school, in college than boys. this is the beginning of the right brain century. This is going to be your century. I would just, there was one question I actually didn't answer, which was how I landed this gig. That was the title of my talk. And so every Saturday for many years, my friend, the legendary football player Roger Craig, and I, we have lunch together. We've been doing this for years. And we usually eat at Cafe Baroni in Menlo Park. And that particular day, we decided to mix it up, and we went to Left Bank, which is a fancier place. And Roger and I were sitting there eating lunch at Left Bank when there was this charming, beautiful young lady sitting next to us by herself. And so the right brain kicked in, and we started talking to her. And then 6 months later, she used a social network, Facebook, to friend me and asked me to give this talk, and that was an yes. So, yeah. So, Professor Hennessy, since nobody got this, you get the present. I'm going to give you 1 share of Apple stock. So. Okay, well, thank you very much.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.